Hello and welcome back. This is another seventh grade math video where today's focus is going to be on division with fractions. Okay, here is our first example. We're going to take the number 2 and we're going to divide it by 1/12. So again, like I've explained in other videos, when we type fractions, we have to type with a slash mark in between because there's just no way for us to type a fraction bar that goes horizontal in between. So, but that's not quite how I like to look at it. So I'm going to start, my first step is going to be to rewrite this problem as 2 divided by 1/12 like that. Now, if it doesn't bother you, you don't have to rewrite it. But for me, you can, for me, I just choose to do that. Okay, so the first thing we want to do here is when we're dividing fractions, we want to be dividing two fractions, nothing else. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn that whole number 2 into a fraction by putting it over 1. That is the quickest way to make a whole number into a fraction. So I'm going to be taking 2 over 1 divided by 1/12. The method we're going to use is kind of called keep, change, flip. Now, I say kind of called that because that's one way to call it. There's been other ways out there, but basically what we're doing is we are changing it to a multiplication problem by the reciprocal of the second fraction, which sounds kind of like a mouthful to say. So that's why we kind of shorten it to keep, change, flip, or some other kind of phrase like that. What that means is I keep the first fraction the same. So that 2 over 1 is going to stay the same. The change is where I change from division to multiplication. So division becomes multiplication. And the F for flip is me flipping the second fraction around so that instead of 1/12, it's 12 over 1. So now I can multiply these just like we did in a previous video. 2 times 12 is 24, and 1 times 1 is 1. So remember, when you're multiplying fractions, you don't have to have the same denominator. We do here, but we don't have to. 24 over 1 is the same or simplifies to 24 as a whole number. So any number over 1 is the same as that number as a whole number. My final answer here for 2 divided by 1/12 would be 24. Okay, here is our next one. We're going to take the fraction 1/2 and divide it by 3. So again, I'm going to rewrite this so that it is 1/2 like this divided by 3. And we're going to use that method again, keep, change, flip. But before we get to the keeping, the changing, and the flipping, we need to go ahead and rewrite that 3 as a fraction because we want to be doing this with two fractions. So the quickest way to turn 3 into a fraction is to put a line or a fraction bar and make it over 1. So this is 1/2 divided by 3 over 1. So the keep means I'm going to keep the first fraction the same. The change means I'm going to change from division to multiplication. And the flip means I'm going to flip the second fraction around so that instead of 3 over 1, it's 1 over 3. Now I can go ahead and multiply these two fractions. 1 times 1 is 1, and 2 times 3 is 6. Now, if that needed to be simplified, this is the place we would do that. But in this case, 1 over 6 cannot be simplified. So our final answer would be 1 over 6. Okay, here is our next one. We're going to take the fraction 2/3 and divide it by another fraction, 2/5. So again, we're going to be we're going to be using keep, change, flip again. And I'm going to rewrite it as 2 over 3 divided by 2 over 5. Now, I don't have to do any changing of any whole numbers to fractions because I already have two fractions that I'm dealing with. So I don't need to do any changing here. What I need, then I can jump to keep, change, flip. So the first fraction is what I'm going to keep. 2/3 is going to stay the same. I'm going to change from division to multiplication. That's the change. And the flip means I'm going to flip the second fraction around so that it is 5 over 2. So now I'm going to go ahead and just multiply these two fractions. 2 times 5 is 10 for the numerator, and 3 times 2 is 6 for the denominator. So we have a couple things here. We have an improper fraction where the top is greater than the bottom, and we have a fraction that could be simplified. So we're going to do a little bit of work here. Let's start by simplifying this. If I can think of a number that both 10 and 6 can be divided by, I can start there. So since they're both even numbers, I know they can both be divided by 2. So 10 divided by 2 is 5. And then 6 divided by 2 is 3. So this simplifies to 5/3. Now I can change it into a mixed number by thinking about how many times 3 fits into 5, which is 1 time, and I would have 2 left over, or 2/3. So 5/3 is the same as 1 and 2/3. Now, there is another way that we could end up with 1 and 2/3 before we multiply, and that's if we simplify before we multiply. So I'm going to erase this to show you how we could do that. And if you're interested in this type of multiplication, I encourage you to check out some of my previous videos where I go a little more in depth about this. So since I noticed that both 2 and 2, so one number from the top and one number from the bottom, or one number from the numerators and another number from the denominators, doesn't have to be on the same fraction, can both be divided by the same number. I'm going to go ahead and divide them both by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1, so I'm going to replace that, and 2 divided by 2 is also 1 down here. Then I'm going to multiply 1 times 5, which is 5, and 3 times 1, which is 3. So if I simplify before I multiply, then this is what I would get. Then I could change it into 1 and 2/3. So even though we took 2 different approaches, we ended up with the same answer of 1 and 2/3. Okay, here is our next one. We have 1/5 and we're going to divide it by 4. So I'm going to rewrite 1/5 here divided by 4, because I like those fractions in that numerator and that denominator be on top of each other. And then we're going to use keep, change, flip. But before we can do that, we have to be dealing with 2 fractions. Since 4 is not a fraction, what I'm going to do is put it over 1 so it becomes a fraction. Now I can keep the first fraction of 1/5 the same, change from division to multiplication, and flip the second fraction around so that it is 1/4. Now I can go ahead and multiply. 1 times 1 is 1, and 5 times 4 is 20. So the final answer here would be 1/20. Okay, here is our last example for today. We're going to take the fraction 1/3 and divide it by another fraction, 1/3. So let me go ahead and rewrite that. 1/3 divided by 1/3. Now, if you are familiar with the rule for division that any number divided by the same number is equal to 1, you already know the answer to this problem. But I'm going to go ahead and do the division just to demonstrate to you how that rule works, especially with the fractions. So keep, change, flip. I'm already dealing with 2 fractions, so I don't have to change anything to a fraction. I'm going to keep the first 1/3 the same. That's the first fraction. Change from division to multiplication and flip that second fraction around so that it is 3/1. Now, if I multiply 1 times 3, I get 3, and 3 times 1, I also get 3. 3/3 simplifies to 1 whole. So yes, 1/3 divided by 1/3 does equal 1. There is also a possibility of doing cross cancellation in this to simplify before you multiply, if you wanted to do it that way, because both 3 and 3 can be divided by 3. So we could do that as well. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 3 divided by 3 is 1. Then I'd multiply 1 times 1 to get 1, another 1 times 1 to get 1. And if I ended up with 1/1, that's the same as 1. That's a lot of times to say the number 1. All right, you guys, thank you so much for joining me today. I hope to see you in another video soon.